Tonight on Newswatch, the president's Asia trip, why it's important to the U.S. and world, and why China isn't on the agenda. Plus, growing prices at the grocery store and gas pump. Can you expect relief for your pocketbook anytime soon? And Heaven is for Real is a hit box office hit. But do some Christians disagree with its message? All this and more tonight on Newswatch. Good evening, I'm Lori Johnson. President Obama is on his way to Asia, where he has some fence mending to do. Starting in Japan, the president will work to reassure America's Asia allies that the U.S. is committed to the region both economically and militarily. The president has promised a U.S. pivot on policy in Asia, but still needs to close the deal on its Trans-Pacific partnership. The U.S. has increased regional military deployments, but after watching Russia annex Crimea, some of America's Asian allies wonder if the U.S. is capable of backing them up against potential Chinese aggressions. After an official state visit to Japan, the president will become the first president since Lyndon Johnson to visit Malaysia. He's also visiting South Korea and the Philippines. The president is not making any stops in China. Joining us now is Chang. He lived and worked in China for 2 decades and is an author and a contributor at Forbes.com. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, what do you think the purpose of this trip is?
It really is to reassure our friends and allies in East Asia. They've been unnerved by the indecisive diplomacy of the White House, especially in connection with Syria and now, of course, Ukraine. So the idea is that we are going there, we're going to talk to our allies, and we're going to put them at the top of the list.
Well, it's very interesting that the president is skipping China, the biggest player in East Asia. Why do you think he's doing that?
Well, there's been too much Chinese diplomacy up to now. And because we have say that they are at the center of the international system, we are feeding their already inflated notions of self-importance. That is counterproductive. As the Chinese think they're important, they become more provocative and belligerent and have been causing trouble in the region, especially in the last 2 years.
Well, do you think our allies in the region have cause to be worried about China?
Well, they do have cause to be worried because Beijing believes that China should be bigger than it is today. And so they are causing friction in an arc of nations from India in the south to South Korea in the north. And of course, they're trying to close off this international water of the South China Sea, which they believe is an internal Chinese lake. And that brings us into play because if the United States has had any consistent foreign policy over the course of 2 centuries, it has been the defense of freedom of navigation. And China is threatening that.
Well, what do you think the U.S. can do to counter China's new aggression?
Well, there are a couple of things that we need to do right away. One of them is we need to be very clear in public as well as in private that the United States will defend its allies and friends in East Asia and that we will be the guarantor of security and that the Chinese have to act within norms. Also, this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a proposed free trade deal between the United States and about 11 nations in the region, is very important because it'll tie them to us rather than to China. So this is a very important part of the pivot, which is this rebalancing of American attention to East Asia.
Well, you mentioned Syria and Ukraine. Do you think our allies trust the Obama administration to defend them against China if necessary?
Certainly, the issue of Syria really got to both Tokyo and Seoul because President Obama announced that he wanted to use military force, but that he first had to go to get congressional approval. And that led many people in the region with defense treaties with the United States wondering whether if China attacked them, President Obama would have to go to Congress in order to honor our defense treaties.
All right, Chang, thanks for your insights and for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for the complete interview with Gordon, go to our website, cbnnews.com. Before heading to Asia, President Obama visits the scene of the deadly mudslide near Oso, Washington. More than 36 people died. And while the search for bodies is over, CBN's David Brody reports there are still people looking for answers.
Along Route 530, the way to the devastating mudslide is lined with signs, "Oh so strong," and God bless Oso, messages of love along a road that has caused so much pain. This road on 530 is going to be closed for a few months, but while this road is closed, there are now open roads to people's hearts because this tragedy has really given pastors an opportunity in this area to talk to people about Jesus. Pastor Michael Duncan in nearby Darrington is one of those spreading the word. He and his wife share a unique perspective. They missed the mudslide by just 2 minutes.
It's hard to talk about because I don't think I deserve to be the man that was saved by 2 minutes.
Yet here he is, alive and trying to make the most of it.
We don't have days left. I had 2 minutes, is all I had. And there were people that died that I knew that didn't have that time. They don't have the rest of the year to get saved. They had that day.
Amanda Scorions almost joined the dead. Her home slid 600 feet before stopping.
I know that God was with us because as it was going, I cried out to him and I said, please save us.
But what about those not saved? Many ask, where was God for them? Pastor Duncan explains it this way.
Well, God is in the middle of all of this. He's right in the middle of it all. The Bible says that God brings the day of disaster as well as the day of blessing. That God is not necessarily, we don't charge God with a fault, that he's not wrong in letting these things happen. There's a day appointed for everybody, and nobody gets to that day without God's permission. That appointed day belongs to God. Life and death are in his hands.
And that's a theme preached by pastors up here. Many are listening and seeking help.
And about 32 have come in this last week or so just for prayer and to find out more about comfort. And so it's been a great opportunity to meet new people and share with them the love and power of Christ.
This area of the Pacific Northwest needs to hear about Jesus. Statistics show it has the least amount of Bible-believing Christians in the country.
It is a highly unchurched area, perhaps in the top 5 unchurched areas of the United States. And so there's a real opportunity now for the church or churches to rise up and show the love of God.
And some are getting closer to God through this ordeal. Pastor Duncan told us about a woman who lost a family member.
She's not saved yet, that I believe. I don't think she is. But she is inquiring about God now, where she wouldn't talk about God at all. She wants to know about eternal things. Is my loved one with God in heaven? What's happened? What comes next? And those are the questions that will lead her to a relationship with Christ.
The pain will linger for some time in this majestic area of the country, but a majestic God is making his presence felt during a time of great agony and suffering. David Brody, CBN News, in Oso, Washington.
Violent clashes developed in East Ukraine just hours after Vice President Biden left Kiev. 2 bodies abducted by pro-Russian insurgents were found, and a military aircraft was fired upon. Biden announced during his visit that the U.S. will provide Ukraine with $50 million to help with reforms. He was there to reinforce the international agreement made last week between the fighting countries. He told Moscow to encourage the pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine to leave government buildings and accept amnesty. Russia denies allegations they instigated the troubles in eastern Ukraine. People are still speaking out for and against the Keystone Pipeline, even though the State Department delayed a decision on its construction. The latest, a protest by the Cowboy and Indian Alliance. They join others accusing the White House of playing politics in an election year. CBN's Caitlin Burke reports.
The Cowboy and Indian Alliance gathered on the Mall in Washington to bring their message to the president. They don't want the Keystone Pipeline and the harm they believe it will bring to their land.
The pipeline is going to contaminate the largest freshwater aquifer in North America, which is the Oglala Aquifer. So the pipeline will break. And once it does, it's going to leak and contaminate all of our fresh water to drink.
The State Department says the latest delay is due to an ongoing court case over the pipeline, but both supporters and opponents say it's actually a case of politics trumping policy. If the pipeline is approved ahead of midterm elections, it could impact Democrats' campaign cash flow. It also keeps liberal environmentalists happy, while still allowing some Democrats to say they support the pipeline and the jobs it would create. The chair of the Democratic National Committee denies using the pipeline to help Democrats keep control of the Senate.
The decision over the Keystone Pipeline is complex, and it's one that has to be examined very carefully. It affects multiple states. What's also true is that incumbent senators like Mary Landrieu understand the issues that are important on the ground in their state to their constituents.
The Keystone Pipeline would carry crude oil from the Alberta oil sands in Canada to Gulf Coast refineries. And supporters are quick to remind groups like Cowboys and Indians that several State Department reviews have already concluded it would be safe and would allow America to get more oil close to home. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Angry Palestinians are waging a smear campaign against one of their own. It comes after a government minister called Jewish blood precious, according to the Keystone Institute report, referring to the shooting death of a Jewish policeman in front of his family last week before Passover. Palestinian Religious Affairs Minister Mahmoud al-Habash said, "We reject all forms of violence, whether they be directed against Israelis or Palestinians. Palestinian blood is like Israeli blood. It is human blood and precious, and no one wants anyone killed." Al-Habash's family disowned him. One militant group demanded an apology, and the Palestinian Authority has not condemned the attack. The Jewish policeman, his wife, and 9-year-old son were on their way to a Passover Seder. He was killed. His wife and son were wounded. A message of light from a place of darkness. Pastor Saeed Abedini sends an Easter message from his hospital bed in Iran, where he's serving an 8-year sentence for his faith. Part of his message reads, "Sometimes we want to experience the glory and resurrection with Jesus without experiencing death with him. We do not realize that unless we pass through the path of death with Christ, we are not able to experience resurrection with Christ." He signed the message, "Prisoner of darkness in Iran, but free for the kingdom and light." Coming up, rising prices are cutting into budgets everywhere. What's fueling high prices at the pump and at grocery stores?
I have a son who's